1, 2, 3, 4. Those are numbers, but you already knew that. If you want to know what number you're going to pay each month for your car, use Kelley Blue Book My Wallet on AutoTrader. They're really good at numbers. AutoTrader.
This episode is brought to you by Starry. When you drink Starry Lemon Lime Soda, every sip is a win. Perfect for game time or anytime. It's a crisp, refreshing lemon lime soda that's caffeine-free and bursting with flavor that makes you go, ah. Starry hits different. Find it in stores or online today.
Alright, and welcome to another Unequal sequel extra, but this is also an extra because it has absolutely nothing to do with sequels. This is the bonus episode we promised of the Lewis Arnold extras, where he is talking about his latest project Time, and he's got some stories about Sean Bean and Stephen Graham. So enjoy this. How much filming have you done in the last year, Lewis? Has it been testing?
Pretty non-stop, yeah. So no, not quite. We were editing Des. So we finished filming Des, and then in sort of end of Jan, I went into the edit, and then COVID started happening, and I think we'd edited episodes 1 and 2, and then as we were doing episode 3, we decided we'd work remotely, and then so we did everything remotely apart from, I think I went in, we did the grade, but I went in for the mixes, and I think I reviewed the grade in Encore. And then everything was stood down. So I took like everybody was, took time out, wrote a book. So I wrote a book. I say wrote a book, that's such a lie. I curated a book. So I started teaching again, basically, when I still couldn't film anymore. I went back to Gloss and did some stuff for Gloss when I was teaching them, because they weren't allowed to make their grad films. So it's a real shame. Like they did our course. Yeah, they did our course, and it's like, you can imagine they'd made one film, they're about to do their bigger film. I cut a long story short, I basically, for them, I decided I wanted to do something for them and give back. So I asked like 15 directors the same 5 questions about how they became a director, and then grew that, and I delivered it to them, and there was like 20 people on it, 25 people on it, and I delivered it, and then delivered it to that year group at Glass, and then just, it was quite a success. And I spoke to a couple of people, I spoke to the NFTS, and they basically said, I wanted to release it, but I wanted to get it to 100 people. And they basically were like, if you do it, and they offered to give me money to basically launch it as a free downloadable book online. So it's called Directors now. And there's a website, and it's all on the website, but there's 106 filmmakers on there and directors on there, varying sort of levels of careers, but most of them relatively, it's not like there's Edgar Wright on there or people like that, but there are some, Alice Lowe, and there's some big TV directors on there that the students wouldn't be that familiar with, but are very, like Paul Whittington and Paul Andrew Williams, who's worked in both film and TV, and commercial directors, documentary directors, animation directors, like the brothers McLeod are on there. And so I launched that, and then I don't know why I'm telling you this, and then I went straight onto Time and then I did the graduation films at NFTS, taught on that, and then I literally finished that, and then literally left that and did Time, and then finished Time and went straight onto this. So literally we only finished Time about 2.5 months ago, and literally wow. I delivered the mixes, and then was on this straight away, because I signed up to do this in November. They needed me to be free as soon as I was free, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's been pretty non-stop, partly because I think there's that worry as well of how much this is going to knock on in terms of just having job security right now is kind of quite important, I think, especially because I've just had another baby, or we've just had another baby. Yeah, I did nothing. My job lasted a few minutes, and yeah.
Amazing. Well, Time's done pretty well, isn't it? Like 8.5 million views or something now.
Yeah. It's done. I mean, it's probably the biggest thing in terms of reach that I've ever done. I'm still getting texts and emails and all sorts now from people I haven't spoken to for years, but also industry people. No, it's done really well. It seems to have sort of reached. I thought Des was pretty good in terms of
Des was good.
how it, not in terms of that arrogantly, in terms of good in.
Oh,
well, I mean good in terms
I'll do
of
it for you. It was good.
reach. In
It
terms
was
of its
good.
reach,
Yeah. You don't have
this
to.
has been huge.
you know.
This has been no. I never like the stuff I make. I always feel a bit awkward about it.
I think that's natural, isn't it? Because whatever you do, there's always something else you think, I could have done that differently, or I could have done this. But outside, Des was great, and Time I really enjoyed.
Well, the BBC gave us an extra 9 minutes for episode 3. That was a bit of a
And that
thing.
says something.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a because there's a way you could have played the episode out. There's a whole bunch of stuff we could have cut from the episode that would have meant it was sort of on length, but we kind of fought pretty hard to keep it because there's a whole strand basically of a character that isn't related to the two central characters. Jimmy's writing. I've always been a fan of like his sort of anthology series, like The Street or The Accused, and I think this kind of doesn't have that. Could have easily been that Jimmy could have wrote this as an anthology series, but actually what I think Jimmy did more successfully here was just give you these punches of these people throughout the series, and we just didn't want to lose that in episode 3, and we had to fight for it, but the BBC were incredibly supportive, so we were quite lucky actually.
I think the best thing you did was make Sean Bean not look tough.
Yeah, I mean, Sean, in all fairness to him, though, I mean,
he
he did a lot of that himself. I mean, he did things like he changed his gait and his whole physicality.
His posture, yeah.
His posture, the way he walked, like he kind of, and the reality is Sean is I mean, people don't know this because people see him on screen and see him shouting in Yorkshire tea adverts and stuff. And he comes across quite confident and cocksure, and actually he's a very, very sensitive, very, very quiet, thoughtful, considerate man. And that might be an age thing. He might have, I don't know what he was like years ago. I can only vouch for him, in my experience of working with him over the last year. He's an incredibly quiet and vulnerable and sensitive soul, but also incredibly funny. I mean, this is one of the, when he warmed up after week 1, like he'd make jokes, but he doesn't make jokes for everybody. He says a joke, and if you hear it, you hear it. And if you don't, it just goes by. And I kind of love that sometimes the first idea just burst out laughing and no one ever really know why. And, later the first bit, Sean just walked past and said a comment about this. But I think people think he's this quite similar to the characters he plays. And I think that was Jimmy's genius because Jimmy wrote it for him. And I would have said that when they spoke about Sean, I was like, okay, that I love Sean, but like, can he play the white collar criminal that you immediately look at and go, he's not going to survive in prison? And instinctively you kind of go, well, that's not Sean because but actually the reality is, if you know Sean or watch him work, he just did it, and he brought so much to it. Yeah, he was the first scene we did, I remember just going, God, we're going to be okay actually, because like I say, he changed everything. He really went there and thought about it on levels that I don't think I even thought that he would go to, but he was outstanding.
Yeah. Did you bring up any Lord of the Rings questions? Because I was
loads.
I would not be able to.
Loads. Yeah, I got a picture of him. We had a day where you'll see in episode 3, he has to wear a suit, like a black and white sort of formal suit. And he walked down to set and I sort of wolf whistled and was like, yes, 006. And then got a picture with him. Like, and we kept joking about that, about how, like, for me, as a Goldeneye was my age of Bond. So there was a lot of talk about Bond. There was a lot of talk about Lord of the Rings. I mean, I'd read Sean Austen's book called There and Back Again, A Hobbit's Tale or something, years and years ago. And so I was saying to him things like, I heard you didn't go on the helicopters, and I had all this information. He was like, how the fuck do you know that? And so he very quickly realized that I was an uber nerd. And Ronin, we spoke a lot about Ronin.
Ronin's great.
I love Ronin. I didn't say anything to him for about a week, and then I think after a week, like, you become quite sort of if it works, you kind of get into that inner sanctum, and then as soon as I get an opportunity, I'd be more in his ear about one of the films he'd done that I was completely in awe of. Yeah.
Was it the same with Stephen Graham, or have you worked with him before. Right?
Slightly different relationship. Just in, I'd never worked with Stephen before. Yeah, I mean, me and Stephen became very like in pre-production. I didn't really chat to Sean only via email until I think the week before we started filming. Where Stephen, I was talking to from. I mean, Stephen was the first person to call me once I got the job. Like, I literally got the job, and then Stephen called me. But that's because me and Stephen have a lot of mutual friends. So me and Stephen just immediately hit the ground running. I think before we'd even started filming, we'd had all of the, we talked about stuff like the Damned United, and I'd asked him about certain stories I'd heard about that. And, obviously I'd heard a lot of the sort of Martin Scorsese stories. But Stephen's like, yeah, that happened more organically. It wasn't like I had to, with Sean, it was always, I felt like I had to position myself and he feels like he's in a place I can ask him about this now. Whereas Stephen, I think before we even got to set, I was like, dude, what was that like? It was just a bit of a different, slightly different dynamic. But yeah, Stephen's got some great fucking stories, man.
Yeah.
But the best one for me was, I mean, when you realise, the great thing about Stephen Graham is he's the most down-to-earth, lovely human being and really looks after people. And he has, he still makes short films. He's doing a short film the other week for a lad that he believed in. And, that's Stephen. Like, Stephen just believes in people and gives back and has no ego at all. So when he tells stories, and when I tell this story, I tell my wife this story, but he started a story very early in the process where he's like, yeah, so Leo was taking me to, and I was like, sorry, Leo DiCaprio was driving a party. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. He's like, yeah. So I'm going to Brad's party. And I was like, Brad Pitt? He's like, yeah. Anyway, and Leo's dropping me off. And I was like, hang on, Leo DiCaprio is dropping you off at Brad Pitt's birthday party. He's like, yeah. I was like, why isn't Leo He's like, oh, they didn't know each other at that point. I'm just thinking, fucking hell, man. Like, you just wouldn't know it though, because he doesn't carry any of that with him. And when he says these stories, he's not saying it in a way to impress you. He's just telling these, anyway, Stephen's stories are just fucking brilliant. A lot of them you can watch, like the stuff about making Irishman and his relationship and what some of the things he was doing the scene where he throws the ice cream and goes for him, like he didn't tell Pacino he was going to do that and stuff. And stories he's got. I mean, he's worked with Daniel Day-Lewis. When Stephen talks, he's a wealth of knowledge. Yeah, it was quite incredible actually. Sitting with him and just chatting about stuff. Everyone behaves according to your number one and your number two on the call sheet. And if your number one and your number two are tricky or slightly ill-behaved, and that might be anything from as little as turning up every day to the floor 15 or 20 minutes late or whatever, that kind of ripples down. I've been really blessed that, quite a number of years now, I've had a really good number one and number two that set the tone and the precedent. And I think it was on Broadchurch that was very clear on Broadchurch that, when David, Olivia, Jodie and Andy are such beautiful human beings and so professional that no one can come into those shows and be difficult, because the top four people in those shows who the show's built around are just a dream to work with. And, I think I learned very quickly from that, if you get your number one and your number two and get them to invest in what you're doing, then it kind of trickles down, really.
We should probably talk about sequels, but that was really interesting.
Yeah, we could just talk all day.
And that was Lewis talking about his experiences on Time with Sean Bean and Stephen Graham. Hope you enjoyed it. We just thought it was too good not to put on the internet somewhere. We'll be back on Friday with our extra episode, which will be sequel related, and then next Monday we'll be back to the interview segment of our podcast. If you want to get hold of us, we're on the socials on Instagram and Twitter at Unequal Sequel, and we're on all podcasting platforms. Also, one last thing, check out Lewis's Directors Now on the internet. I'm so old. Check it out if you're interested in directing. That's a really good place to start, and it's got some really interesting stories about how directors got started. Well, some directors, over 100 directors got started. And that's all from me, so I'll see you next time. Bye.